All right, let's talk about the invisible science that literally keeps our world from sinking. We're going to dig into the ground beneath our feet and the incredible engineering that lets us build, well, pretty much everything on top of it.
I mean, it's a totally fair question, isn't it? We stack these immense city block sized weights onto the earth and just kind of expect it to be fine. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not magic and it's definitely not luck. It's a very specific, very important field of science. Okay, let's get into it. So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the big picture, the unseen foundation. Then, we'll get our hands dirty, literally, with the anatomy of soil. After that, we'll see how engineers classify it, then understand the forces at play within it. And finally, we'll see how all that science lets us build with confidence.
Right, so to answer that big question from the beginning, we need to introduce the hero of today's story. This is the discipline that makes sure our buildings, our bridges, our entire cities have a solid start.
And this is it, geotechnical engineering. It's a branch of civil engineering that's all about how stuff like soil and rock behaves under pressure. It's not about the shiny steel and concrete of a building, it's all about the ground it has to stand on.
Think about it. Every time you drive through a tunnel or cross a massive bridge, or even just work in a tall office building, you are putting your trust in the work of a geotechnical engineer. They're the ones who design the parts you never, ever see, but that are, you could argue, the most critical part for keeping us all safe.
Okay, so let's dig in a little deeper. To really engineer the ground, you first have to understand what it's even made of. And trust me, it's a lot more complicated than just dirt. Yeah, so for an engineer, soil isn't just something you plant flowers in. It's a very specific material that's been created over thousands, even millions of years. As rock breaks down and gets mixed up with organic stuff, the history of that soil really defines its properties today. And here is the absolute key idea. Soil isn't just one thing. It's what we call a three-phase material. You've got the solid bits, the mineral particles, but just as importantly, you also have water and air filling all the little gaps or voids between them. This super complex mix is what gives soil its unique and sometimes really challenging properties. To put a number on this, engineers use something called the void ratio. It's a simple idea, but it's incredibly powerful. A high void ratio means there's lots of empty space, kind of like a sponge, which means it might compress a lot. A low void ratio tells me the particles are packed together really tightly. Which, of course, brings us to a super crucial point. Not all soil is the same. An engineer absolutely has to have a system to know if they're dealing with solid, dependable ground or something that's a little more like peanut butter. So the first big split is between coarse-grained and fine-grained soils. Just think of beach sand and gravel versus, say, silt and clay. With sand, its behavior really comes down to the size and shape of the particles. But with clay, it is all about one thing: water. And that right there is the million-dollar question for fine-grained soils. The exact same piece of clay can be rock-hard when it's dry, it can be pliable like modeling clay with a little bit of water, or it can be a soupy mess when it's completely saturated. So how on earth do engineers measure this transformation? Well, they use this really clever system called the Atterberg Limits, and they're not as complicated as they sound. They're basically just specific percentages of water content that mark the tipping point from one state to another, from liquid to plastic to solid. And this is a brilliant way to visualize it. When you're above the liquid limit, the soil literally behaves like a thick fluid. Below the plastic limit, it enters that plastic state. You can roll it into a little thread without it crumbling. And as it gets even drier, it becomes semi-solid and brittle. Knowing these limits is absolutely vital for predicting how a soil is going to behave on the construction site. Okay, now we are getting to the absolute heart of it. We know what soil is made of, we know how to classify it. Now let's talk about how it actually handles the immense weight of our buildings and bridges. This is all about stress, water, and ultimately, strength. First up, we have to talk about something called permeability. It's really just a measure of how easily water can flow through the soil. Gravel is super permeable. Water just zips right through it. Clay is the complete opposite. It has very low permeability, so it can trap water inside for a very, very long time. And this ability to trap water, oh man, that is incredibly important. So I want you to imagine a tiny little point deep down in the ground. The total stress on that point is pretty simple to understand. It's just the weight of everything above it, all the solid soil particles and all the water in those voids, all pressing down. But
And this is a huge but. Remember that trapped water? Well, it pushes back. It exerts its own pressure, which we call pore water pressure. And here is the most crucial point of all. This water pressure doesn't help hold anything up. In fact, it does the opposite. It pushes the solid particles apart, actively working against the soil's strength. And this brings us to what is, and I'm not exaggerating, the single most important concept in all of soil mechanics: effective stress. It's just the total stress, minus that pesky pore water pressure that's trying to push everything apart. This is everything. Get this wrong and disasters happen. If you've ever seen a levee fail during a flood, it's often because the rising water pressure inside the soil mass pushes the grains apart, reducing that effective stress to almost zero and turning solid earth into liquid mud. Effective stress is the real strength-giving pressure between the soil grains. Okay, so let's bring this all home. How do we use this understanding of soil particles and water and this all-important effective stress to actually build things safely? The final goal, the whole shebang, is to figure out the soil's shear strength, which is just its ability to resist sliding apart. A soil's strength really comes from two things. First is cohesion. Think of it as its natural stickiness, like how clay holds together. And the second is internal friction, which is the grip between all the particles. And what increases that grip? You guessed it, effective stress. More effective stress squeezes those particles together, which creates more friction, more grip, and ultimately more strength. And understanding that one property, that shear strength, is what makes everything else possible. It's what tells an engineer how big to make a skyscraper's foundation, or how to design a wall to hold back an entire hillside, or how to tunnel straight through a mountain without the whole thing caving in. So, the reason that skyscraper doesn't just sink into the ground is because some very smart engineers carefully analyzed the soil, understood its weird three-phase nature, calculated the effective stress, and then designed a foundation that would not, under any circumstances, exceed the soil's shear strength. It's a science that is completely invisible in our day-to-day lives, but it is absolutely essential to everything. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other hidden engineering marvels are out there, quietly and reliably keeping our modern world running?